It's really a question of risk. I mean, the general rule is anytime that a producer or an individual is using someone else's IP or their image or likeness, any intellectual property rights that belong to someone else, a third party or a third party entity, they need their permission to do so. That's the general rule. There are some exceptions to that. That's how productions get made. I mean, a production, a feature film or television series, you want it to seem like it's a part of society. There might be some incidental references, but there are some exceptions to that. In Canada, we have an exemption to copyright infringement called fair dealing. In the United States, it's known as fair use. This is basically a series of tests that if you complete it, there's a chance in which you'd be able to rely on the exception to copyright infringement. So you can use that material potentially without a third-party claim. You have a quote-unquote legal right to use that material. There's also incidental use. So if a brand or a logo or an individual is caught on camera incidentally, maybe a split second, not in focus, should be permissible to use, but it's really a question of risk. Sometimes something comes up in a script clearance report, sometimes it's in a rough cut. Like if I am reviewing a script clearance report and there's a list of names, John Smith or something like that, the script clearance report will tell me how many individuals have that first and last name in the area, in the province, in the city. Maybe there's one with the same job as the character in which the film is portraying. We want to make sure that we avoid any similarities, especially if there's like a negative inference or a negative connotation with that character. Anything that could potentially damage someone's reputation, we need to be mindful of that risk. There are things above and beyond a script or script clearance that you'll see in a rough cut, or maybe even not in a rough cut, that an entertainment lawyer needs to be able to flag. If there's a scene with two kids hanging out in a bedroom, what does the bedroom look like? Is there poster art? Are the kids wearing t-shirts that have brands or logos on it? Their shoes? Are there iPhones in shot? Is there other forms of technology that either has third-party brand or logo, or a reasonable person would know that that is unique enough that when they see that product or that item, they know that it belongs to a third-party entity. And how much of that is in focus? Are they talking about it? Is there a positive or negative reference? So a kid running away from a bullying scene wearing a pair of Nike shoes, there might be a negative connotation associated with that. So we need to be mindful of the risk. And if there is a risk and we don't feel confident that it would meet any type of exemption to copyright infringement, any type of fair dealing test or incidental use reference, we need to ask that third party for permission, and maybe it comes with some sort of monetary compensation for them, but some type of release will need to ultimately be signed. So it's really a question of risk. The goal as an entertainment lawyer is ideally to get risk to zero, but practically to just reduce the risk as much as possible. Something that's worth noting though is when it comes to these exemption to copyright infringement tests, such as fair dealing, that is a defense mechanism. So even if you go through that test and you're confident that you can meet those thresholds, you can't exactly hold it out as a waving flag and say, we're fine, we've passed this test, we can now move forward to production. There's always a possibility that an entity might sue the production or might try to in some way interfere with the exploitation of that project. So even if we're confident legally, we need to be mindful of how that's going to play out practically, because you still have to defend that claim. So in the defense of that claim, you would basically go through the test of fair dealing to prove it. But ultimately, it's up to the lawyer to, if there's even a chance of that coming up, we need to provide a fair dealing analysis or opinion on it and provide to the insurer, just to make sure that the insurance company obviously feels comfortable enough to provide that policy.